Hello and welcome to episode 110 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. I'm your host, Sigmund Judge. I am joined, as I am every week, by my co-host, Mr. Devon Dundee. And Devon, it's been a couple of weeks where everything's been very Apple Vision Pro heavy. This week, I think there's a bigger focus on Apple TV and HomePod as well. I know you enjoy both. What has been the balance 2 weeks in between Apple Vision Pro and Apple TV?
It's definitely become more balanced over time. I think when I first got my Apple Vision Pro, my initial reaction was, I just want to live in this thing, which is, I think that's something a lot of people feel. I'm still spending a lot of time in the Apple Vision Pro watching shows and films that I watch on my own. That's where I've been doing that. But of course, you can't really share that experience with anybody unless they have an Apple Vision Pro as well. So for things that I'm watching with my wife or with friends, that's all been on Apple TV. So that's been my balance there. Both are awesome experiences in their own right that offer unique advantages. And that's what I've been enjoying and kind of realizing over the past couple of weeks. Now, you, of course, you have your home cinema set up that you've talked about on the show before. So how have you found the balance between that and the Apple Vision Pro?
Well, you know, we've had award ceremonies recently. We have a big week for sports coming up as well. And so I have been using the bigger screen a lot more. Although, and this is going to sound really strange considering the pass-through quality in low light, but I've been using like a mixture of my big screen and my virtual assets on Apple Vision Pro upstairs for taking notes nice and quickly and, well, not quickly, but for taking notes and researching and doing other things whilst still having that focus on the main screen. And that's just a little bit of experimentation on my side. But the Apple TV is going to get a lot more use because not only do we have a new MLS season with MLS Season Pass beginning once again this week, featuring all of the stars coming back to the pitch. The thing that I have been most looking forward to talking about with you over the last few months is how we're going to kick off this show, and that is by highlighting Constellation. When a fatal accident occurs on board the International Space Station, a lone astronaut makes the heroic journey back to Earth, only to discover key pieces of her life, including her young daughter, have changed.
I miss you so much.
I miss you too, Mama. Will you be careful out there?
I'm very happy to be back home. But things are different.
Astronauts go through things they don't understand.
Mama?
That's when people come unstuck.
This isn't madness!
I just don't feel like you're my mum.
This is created by Peter Harness, directed by the great Michelle McLaren, starring Noomi Rapace and Jonathan Banks amongst quite an incredible ensemble cast. We've been very fortunate to check out the first 3 episodes of Constellation. We've been chomping at the bit, I think, to really get into this. Devon, kick it off and expand a little bit on the premise of this show and the characters that we get to engage with.
So the main story of the first episode sees Jo on the International Space Station. She is up there with her crew, and she's having a little FaceTime with her daughter, Alice. And one thing I really love about that scene on the International Space Station, the first one, is the familiarity between Jo and the crew, but also Alice and the crew. You can tell that this is a family. These are people who really care about and know each other well and are invested in each other. And I think that's just a really cool little insight into the life that Jo is living and the way that it connects on the International Space Station, but also on Earth. And as Jo is having this conversation with Alice and looking out the window at Earth and telling her to wave hello to herself down there, which I thought was really cute, they're also doing an experiment with this mysterious machine that they only refer to as the Cal. We don't really know what it does or what it's for, but we know that they're working on it at the same time that she's having this call with Alice. And then suddenly the entire space station is rocked with this impact, and alarms start blaring, fires start going off, and suddenly the crew has to go into emergency mode to get not only the space station back to a place where it can be inhabitable, but also get themselves to safety. And that's where Jo really steps up, and we really get to see just how brave and capable she is. She's put in command of the space station, takes a number of steps not only to assess the situation and try to understand how to deal with it, but also to get her crew to safety, ultimately sending them off in an escape pod, leaving her behind to do some essential repairs to hopefully get an escape pod that she can get home in. So she finds herself, after this just traumatic incident, she's alone on the International Space Station, not sure how or if she's going to survive this situation. And throughout it all, she remains very steadfast, committed to the mission. And another thing I love about her characterization is how by the book she is on things, constantly in communication with Command Center and doing things the right way. Only after they are safely headed back to Earth does she start to turn and think about getting herself back. More to get home to see her daughter than anything else, I think.
She's fortunate enough to have still that opportunity in her hands, right? To be able to get back to her daughter, because in this very dramatic opening sequence for Constellation, they're quickly one crew member down. The significance of that, I think, comes into play a little bit later. You know, if you can only imagine being on a space mission now by yourself, floating in space, trying to fix things. The main reason why Jo is by herself up in space now is because there simply isn't enough oxygen, and there's only 19 hours on the clock to get everything fixed before hopefully coming home. She quickly loses contact with those on Earth. There's a 45-minute period in which she has to power down, ready for when daylight comes back around. And in that time and all of her thoughts and her presence shifts. There is something quite special about this show in the sense that time and multiple realities are almost a character in themselves. I wonder how that made you feel, because for me, after watching those first couple of episodes, I found them to induce like personal nightmares for me, but that might be because I was watching this on the moon.
It's just a little too close to home for you, Sigmund, if you're sitting on the moon watching all this happen, right? For me, yeah, I was definitely on the edge of my seat, heart racing type situation. I didn't have nightmares afterwards, but it is the kind of thing that sticks with you, and you think about what it must be like to be the only person on the space station fighting for your survival. And the other thing that left me a little bit unsettled maybe after that first episode is the way this whole opening sequence is framed at the beginning and the end, with these scenes of Jo 5 weeks after the incident back on Earth with her daughter fleeing into the woods of Sweden. And we don't know exactly what's wrong, but we can tell that this Jo that we're seeing here is not the same Jo that we see up on the International Space Station. So confident in taking charge and really knowing what to do. Now, 5 weeks later, she seems, I don't know if she's frantic or a little bit paranoid or what it is, but there's something going on with her that we don't totally understand, but it's in some way seemingly connected to this traumatic experience that she has on the International Space Station. And so we'll have to wait and see how exactly all of that plays out.
Yeah, I think, we do weave, don't we, in between different narratives and different timelines and maybe different realities, which makes this not your conventional narrative storytelling. That, I think, is initially a little bit jarring. But I think by the third episode, things do start to at least take shape, even if they don't necessarily make complete and utter sense. I'm really enjoying the slow reveal of these first 3 episodes. One thing I will say, 2 episodes in, right, I do feel like the 2 episodes need to be watched as one and then have a break and then check out the 3rd episode. And I say that because really nothing is given away in that first episode. There is so much going on that certain things that maybe will appear important later on, you're kind of told to look the other way in a lot of ways and shift your focus. I also think the characters are slowly revealed to us as well in their importance. You know, Alice, the daughter of Joe, she's such a young girl, and yet so cynically minded and so inquisitive. And the exposition of the show quickly starts to revolve around her, as do Joe's anxieties. This is a really difficult one without spoiling anything, Devon. You know, once we can recap the show, it's going to make a lot more sense. The one thing I will say is Will Catlett, his scenes, I think, are going to be far more important than they are on initial inspection. We can't really explain why just yet, but I would say keep an eye out for that. And someone we haven't really talked about just yet that I feel we need to very quickly is, of course, Jonathan Banks' character, Henry Bud Caldera, because we've only really seen him as a bit of a bruiser on the screen. I think he's fantastic in this, and he has secrets to share that Joe, by the end of the third episode, is maybe starting to understand and possibly entangle herself in.
Yeah, I love this character that he's playing. The thing that separates Henry, to me, from some of Jonathan Banks' previous characters is that he has something that he really believes in. He's not just looking out for himself. He's so invested in this experiment that he's doing. He believes in the power of this cow device and whatever it's supposed to be doing. Again, we don't totally understand that really drives him in a lot of ways. And I think it makes him approachable, likable, maybe still too strong of a word, because he's still, kind of that grumpy man kind of thing. But the ways that his passion for his work start to intersect with Joe's experience, and the way that they can kind of relate on that level of both having been to space and experiencing things that no one else really can relate to, and the way that those impact them, I think that's going to be a really interesting relationship to keep an eye on. So definitely an interesting addition to this story. Not one that we can talk about too deeply yet, again, because much of his story is yet to be revealed. Definitely an enjoyable aspect of the series for sure.
Well, whatever secrets are to be unveiled, one thing I can say is at the end of the first episode, you get that warning right at the end of the credits saying that the European Space Station do not share the beliefs that this show basically sets up in, roundabout way. So I'm very, very much looking forward to the reveal. I, again, would suggest that people check out the first 2 episodes as one. Take a breather, then watch the third episode with new episodes of Constellation premiering each Wednesday across all of your screens on Apple TV+. Cannot wait to talk about this more with you, Devon, and more with everyone else. You can, of course, email the show with your thoughts on the premiere week, magic@macstories.net. And speaking of sharing thoughts, a lot of thoughts were shared on Apple TV and Apple's overall business, segment by segment this week, as part of Jason Snell's annual Apple report card over at 6 Colors. We, of course, want to focus on Apple TV and tvOS and some of the thoughts that were given. A grade C, 3 out of 5, so not too bad, I think. Lots of really interesting takes on Apple TV, and sometimes we get so excited about what's new on tvOS and that tvOS and Apple TV is getting some attention that maybe we don't look into the overall picture as much over here on Magic Rays of Light. And so this was interesting and sombering in a lot of ways. Just very quickly overall, what were your thoughts giving this a read?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting getting such a diverse perspective on the Apple TV from people who don't talk about it week in and week out like we do. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting to see some of the things that came up, things that we've talked about on the show, but maybe we don't always know the impact that they're going to have or the breadth of the impact that they're going to have on other people. And so I really loved reading this and thought some of the perspectives and quotes were really intriguing and enlightening on some of the stuff that we talk about here.
Let's start with what John Gruber had to say. He had a lot to say, but I think the biggest part for me was when he said that the big change in tvOS is moving the iTunes movie and TV stores into the TV app. Overall, that's a wash for me, but it's slightly irritating insofar as I really only ever buy or rent movies nowadays. My TV show watching goes through streaming apps, but the store tab in the TV app gives prominent placement on the main screen to a row full of popular TV shows. All I want to see are movies. This is an interesting take because this is something we've been talking about forever, in terms of the customizability of the TV app and what you see, what you want to see, what you don't want to see, and really having that utility to change the Apple TV experience to something that's more personable rather than targeted. Matt Deveridge had something similar along those lines in the sense that he says that the Apple TV app has gone all in on the philosophy Steve Jobs always rejected. Instead of putting your content front and center, it shunts you to the side to make you wade through what Apple wants you to see. Preview the next episodes in your up next list. Nope. That space belongs to Apple TV Plus programs now, and you can't reclaim it even if you're an Apple TV Plus subscriber. Below my up next queue are 6 rows of essentially ads for content Apple wants me to watch or buy. Only at the bottom of the third screen do I get the For You feed with more ad rows interspersed from there to the end. It's interesting because, of course, Apple have renamed that section the Home section, and I feel like it should make you feel at home and it should be a home for you because, as we've said every time, we have a Store tab section. We have Apple TV Plus. We have different sections now for, all of the Apple TV channels. And so I think there are a lot of positives that have come from this that aren't necessarily highlighted, but I totally understand a lot of the frustrations here.
And it really speaks to how impactful that demotion of the Up Next queue was on the homepage, that we're still talking about it. It's not been a year yet, but you and I covered it when it first happened, and we said it was going to have repercussions as far as just people's whole experience and thought on the Apple TV app. And so seeing it come back up again several months later now, I think it just speaks to, again, maybe how questionable that decision was and how much people would appreciate, again, some customization, the ability to make that row and that whole tab more of what they want to see rather than what someone else wants them to see. Carolina Milanese wrote something that I think a lot of people have been thinking about lately, and we actually talked about this at the top of the show, right? She says, I am not really sure what else Apple can do in this segment that is hardware, and I feel as Vision Pro grows that this is where the TV Play will go. And so the Apple Vision Pro as the premier way to enjoy movies, TV shows, and sports, that's an interesting question. I think there's definitely some trade-offs there, some advantages that the Apple TV still has and will have for some time to come. We're still a good ways away from, I think, the Apple Vision Pro being the only way for people to enjoy watching things. But for a lot of people, it will become their main way, and it might pull some people away from the Apple TV. And so that's an interesting open-ended question, that relationship between the two devices. And I think we're just going to have to wait and see how exactly that plays out, but it's an interesting question for sure. Finally, Matt Birchler wrote, Apple gets points for still having what I think is the best smart TV interface out there, but I also feel like every update to tvOS is making the experience slightly worse. The TV app used to be a place that felt customized for me with my watch queue front and center, but now it feels like a place for Apple to advertise movies on their store, Apple TV Plus shows they really want me to care about, and oh yeah, did you know that Messi joined Miami? My watch queue is still there, but more and more it feels like opening Netflix. My queue is there, but most of the screen is taken up by what they want me to care about over what I actually care about. Really great thoughts from Matt there. I definitely resonate with the frustrations about the Up Next queue being demoted. We've talked about that here. And that's a move that's just affected a lot of people and a lot of people aren't happy about. But I also really resonated with what Matt said about the Apple TV, despite these criticisms still being the best way to enjoy streaming films and TV shows, right? And I think that's a pretty common sentiment as well. It's like, we love this thing, and so we want it to be the best that it can be, and that's why people are sharing these criticisms of it. And, it's at a 3. 3's not failing, right? 3 is in the middle there. There's room for improvement, and I completely agree that there's things that I'd love to see come to the Apple TV, but at the same time, I appreciate it for what it is and what it does for me. So, really enjoyed those thoughts. I think the report card really gives a great overview of where people are at with the Apple TV, a very broad perspective that resonates with a lot of what we talk about on here. Here's to hoping that maybe we get it to a 4 or even a 5 next year. Wouldn't that be great?
It would. I hope so, Devon. Because, reading into this and reading all of these thoughts, initially I was like, oh, but what about all of the positive advancements that we've seen this year? And there is a few mentions for continuity camera and that kind of thing. But it seems to be that a lot of the criticisms are mostly aimed at the TV app. And my tvOS 17 review on Mac Stories last year had a whole kind of opening segment on that and where things could improve on that side of things. What I think, looking at this, is that there still seems to be, from a user experience perspective, a bit of a disconnect between what the TV app team are doing, what the original content division team are doing, and what the tvOS team are doing when it comes to their user first focus, right, and the usability of the Apple TV. For that reason, I feel like things have got diluted a little bit, and there needs to be a readjustment, really, of what is most important to the user experience. We've praised the ingenuity of continuity camera and SharePlay, the connectivity with HomePods and AirPods, but there's still lots missing, and things feel far more complicated probably than they need to be. For a long, long time, Apple were known for simplicity. There are many, many examples even today of Apple being their best at that. So hopefully we see that. Again, thanks to Jason Snell for linking to my tvOS 17 review in this segment. That was a nice surprise. Hopefully we can bring him back on the show soon, because it's been a while. Maybe a tvOS wish casting session. What do you say, Jason? What do you say, Devon?
I say bring it on. Let's do it. We love our wish casting, and it would be awesome to do that with Jason as well. So that's the year in review for Apple TV, according to the 6 Colors report card. Now let's look at something fun that could be coming in the far or maybe even the near future. This week, Felipe Esposito at 9to5Mac reported on a continued rumor of a HomePod with a screen running tvOS. This seems to be something that Apple are experimenting with internally, and according to code in the tvOS 17.4 Beta 3, there are references to a device Z314 that's running an A15 processor, which is the same as in the current iPad mini. Seems to be some kind of iPad mini running tvOS that could be in the later stages of development, from what they can tell. Mm-hmm. Other hints in this code that Apple are moving towards some kind of HomePod with a screen. There are SwiftUI frameworks and other tools that have been added to the operating system that suggest use on a device with a touchscreen. I don't know about you, Sig, but I've never used tvOS on a device with a touchscreen. I always use my Siri remote. But that's something they're working on inside Apple. Really interesting story. We've heard hints of this before, but it seems like these rumors are growing that something really could be coming of this. What do you think of this idea, Sigmund?
I love the idea. I've wanted a screen that's going to follow me around certain areas like the kitchen. To be quite honest with you, I want a HomePod in my home theater, but I don't really need a HomePod pair. So I've wanted something that really could represent Apple's aspirations for the home. Mm-hmm. There have been questions about those aspirations in recent years. I think we could finally be seeing something here. It's interesting that tvOS would be the basis for this as opposed to iOS if we're talking about an iPad mini size screen. Someone from Google was talking about how the TV being the like central communal screen in the home should be more focused towards a home hub. And the Apple TV has a history of that. It was the first home hub for Apple HomeKit. I think Apple really understood that from the beginning. But if you look at the integration of Apple TV and the home, or the lack of integration when it comes to automations and different things like that, my question is, are we talking about tvOS or are we talking about HomeOS? Because in a separate report from a few weeks ago, we saw in the code further mentions of HomeOS. I think the first mention of HomeOS was a job listing by Apple that was quickly pulled, but we know something is in the works. And so I wonder, beyond tvOS and its AV Foundation kit, whether or not the home for TV on the Apple TV will eventually be the TV app, and that's maybe why it's trying to do 1,000,001 things. And the rest of that experience is actually centered more around the home.
I think it's an intriguing idea for sure. I could see it happening. Of course, HomePods have run tvOS for quite some time now. Apple kind of likes that synergy between different OSs. iOS and iPadOS very much have that alignment that we could see between the TV and the home stuff. And even on Apple's website, of course, TV and home is one category, right? They really do consider that to be a group. And so if we're going to see a HomePod running some kind of visual OS, I think HomeOS makes a lot of sense. And I think it would also make a lot of sense on the TV as well. Just to see that whole strategy really come to fruition, have some clarity to it with the TV at the center of it. That's been my dream for a long time. And there's no bigger HomePod stand than me. So I'm going to be excited about new HomePod hardware as well. If I could get one as like a digital frame on my bedside table with that Apple TV photo screensaver, but on a smaller screen that I could put anywhere, oh man, I couldn't buy that thing fast enough. I'll take two, actually.
I do wonder how quickly we may see said device. As much as I would love for maybe us to see something at Apple's next event in March, I do think that there's still a fair way to go with regard to software integrations and the things that have been missed, like, for example, the ability to be able to talk to one of your home cameras on the Apple TV and not just check in and see who rang the doorbell and then have no way of contacting them. So hopefully we see some of those introduced at the same time as a device like this.
Well, one thing we know about the HomePod is you can't predict the HomePod. So we'll just wait with bated breath, Sigmund. How about that? Moving from the potential of HomeOS to an operating system that we're just getting to know, visionOS, we have a few more tidbits that we wanted to share with our Apple Vision Pro experiences. I know you and I both have been spending some time this week, Sigmund, sharing the device with other people and kind of getting a feel for what it's like to see it through their eyes. What's it been like sharing Apple Vision Pro with others?
I actually think it's probably been the best secondhand tech experience I've ever had. Because the reaction's always the same. It's the mouth opens, followed by wow, wow, wow. Interestingly, I shared this with a few members of my family this past weekend. Those that are addicted to their phones actually found the navigation initially a bit harder to adjust to, but those that took on the interactions instantly were surprisingly my 83-year-old grandfather and my 93-year-old grandmother, who had an absolute blast. The one thing that they had initial issues with was the scrolling, but straight away I got them into immersive video. And my grandmother, even with some of her like visual impairments, was still able to enjoy immersive video, and she was absolutely blown away. And keep in mind, at 93 years of age, she would have seen the introduction of the television, right? And so this was just another level. The one thing she just said was, I hope that I'm here to see this in glasses form, and so do I. But yeah, just a really, really incredible experience. Some other incredible experiences that I wanted to talk about very quickly, some app recommendations. Of course, this is the early time where anytime there's a new app, you just want to download it. It's very much like the initial introduction of the iPhone in that sense. Home UI is an app that I absolutely adore. It brings Apple Home to your augmented reality. I've just been placing different lights and different switches around the house on top of the switches that actually exist, which I don't know if there's much utility to that, but it was a lot of fun. And then in terms of screenshots, a tool that I think everyone should be checking out, Charlie Chapman made this really simple app, and the best apps on Vision OS are the simple ones right now, and that is Level Headed. It received a 1.1 update this past week, which introduces an actual frame in your peripheral vision, so you can tilt your head, get everything ready, and then keep your head straight and balanced, and then exit that and quickly take your screenshot. That has been the easiest way of what is a bit of a cumbersome process for Vision OS. So that's something I think people should check out. And then two things: the news ticker, which is really, really helpful for when you're watching sports and you just want your general scores to come through. Really, really cool. Lots of development still happening there. And then Day Peak, which I know your calendar's normally a lot more full than mine, Devon. But it's this widget that basically has countdowns for the different things that are on your calendar. Comes really, really handy in terms of keeping time. And so all of those app recommendations we'll have in the show notes. But one recommendation that I wanted to bring up was actually to do with Vision OS itself and eating snacks. Now, you and I, we both remember the introduction of Apple Vision Pro, and there's that particular scene where someone is watching Napoleon on the biggest virtual screen that they can in the living room, and their snack of choice is popcorn. But what are they doing? They're not just taking a popcorn and putting it in their mouth. They are flicking the popcorn up into the air with the Apple Vision Pro on and catching it in their mouth. But one thing that I've come into a little bit of frustration with is when watching films, snacking, right? Because when you snack, when you take a crisp or a piece of popcorn or a sweet or something, you tend to put your thumb and forefinger together to grip said snack before eating it. Flicking popcorn is a party trick that I have not yet mastered. I'm not too sure about you, Devon. I've had popcorn going all over the room, which is not a good look at all. It turns out you don't need to flick popcorn into your mouth, because what you can do is you can go into the settings app, choose the option for hands and eyes, and there's an option there to be able to choose just one hand for your input interactions on Vision OS. And therefore you're not going to mistakenly pause or make a screen go from really large to small or just disappear altogether, which is really, really handy. So if anyone's been having the same struggles, struggle no more. Right?
Well, that's a great tip, Sigmund. You can assign a snack hand in the Vision OS settings. That's going to save me so much vacuuming of my couch, which I very much appreciate. Continuing with Vision OS, we do have a couple bits of Vision OS news. In addition to the spatial games that are already available on Apple Arcade, Apple this week announced 3 new spatial titles that are coming soon. Those include Alto's Odyssey: The Lost City, Gibbon Beyond the Trees, and Spire Blast. It's really cool to see how many spatial games are already available on Apple Arcade, but the fact that they're bringing more in, that they're going to continue to grow the service in this way in addition to the standard titles for other devices, I think that's just really cool. I'm excited to see what Gibbon Beyond the Trees looks like in a spatial experience. That sounds like a lot of fun.
And Alto's Odyssey as well, right? What are they going to do with that? That's going to be interesting. The one that I'm most excited to start playing again is Spire Blast. I got to a certain level and it defeated me, I think, with this new dimension. That will either make things a lot easier or a lot harder. So I'm excited for that one. but they're coming soon. Let's talk about what's actually come this past week. I'm not necessarily a big fan of TikTok. I don't know if you're even on it, Devon, but this native Vision OS app is pretty special, I think.
Well, I'm a bit of a TikTok curmudgeon, Sigmund, so I actually haven't downloaded the app to my Apple Vision Pro yet. But from what I've read and the screenshots that I've seen, it seems like it really does take true advantage of Vision OS as far as like expanding off to the side when you want to see more details of something, kind of like what Messages does when you want to see a detailed view of your conversation, which is really unique and cool and a lot better UI than just layering things over top of one another like on the phone. To me, what this really represents is the first social app, the first big social media platform really taking an investment into Vision OS. A lot of the other social apps aren't available or only available in iPad compatibility mode. And so it'll be cool to see if other social media platforms will kind of follow the trend and get on Vision OS as well. In the meantime, if you're a big TikToker, now you can watch those videos on your Apple Vision Pro, and one more way to just spend lots of time in Vision OS and have fun there.
Interesting that you talked about the iPad apps in compatibility mode. One of the biggest disappointments during the Apple Vision Pro weekend launch was Amazon Prime Video, because I downloaded multiple episodes of Mr. and Mrs. Smith to watch on my flight home, only to find that when I interacted with the player, you had that white square just stay persistent every time I looked at the screen. We talked about that, and you explained to me how this was an issue that could be quickly resolved. Well, thankfully, it has now been resolved. Amazon Prime Video updated their iPad app this past week, and now that video player bug is fixed. So this week, on another trip, I will be finally getting around to watching that series in all its glory on Apple Vision Pro.
Very cool. But with all the Vision Pro app talk, we couldn't leave you without some Apple TV app news as well. And this is pretty exciting, Sigmund. Major League Baseball announced this week that during the upcoming season, the MLB app for Apple TV will offer a multi-view mode that supports streaming up to 4 games at once. The Quad Box continues to infiltrate every part of tvOS, Sigmund, and I'm here for it.
Also, whilst not confirmed at the time of recording, it seems as though Apple will continue to show Friday Night Baseball, with the company agreeing to the option to extend their deal beyond the initial 2-season agreement. That is according to some of the presenting talent behind Apple's MLB broadcasts, appearing on social media this past week and being very, very excited for the upcoming season, as spotted by our good friend and former colleague James Lees, who is so excited for the MLB season, probably as much as I am for the MLS season beginning this week. Lots and lots of eyes, I'm sure, are going to be tuned to both, but when it comes to Apple Originals, we've got some very exciting news to share.
That's right. We found out this week that Masters of the Air had the most watched series premiere of any series in Apple TV Plus history, leading to a 65% increase in the service's viewership week over week and continued growth of viewership on the service as the weeks go on. That's a really big impact for a show that, of course, was very, very highly anticipated, and one that I know you and I are both very much enjoying as it continues to run on Apple TV Plus.
Yeah, I think also just to be able to see Apple TV Plus continue to maintain that double-digit growth in more than 100 countries. Of course, we don't normally hear a lot when it comes to figures and performance from Apple, but they reached out to Variety for an exclusive this week. And yeah, that's great news for, of course, the stories that we are so committed to on this podcast. And no doubt fruitful for the storytellers as well. One storyteller that we are excited to see finally come to Apple TV Plus is, of course, Ridley Scott and his feature film Napoleon, which saw a theatrical run in November. It's been quite a wait, but Napoleon will debut on Apple TV Plus on Friday, March 1st. Now, I've seen this myself already theatrically, so I'm personally looking forward to rewatching select scenes before screening the widely anticipated director's cut, if that does indeed come to fruition. Of course, for everyone else, 20 weeks on from its theatrical debut, whilst I commend everyone's patience, I do wonder if this is maybe too long a rollout from theatrical to streaming, because at least from my perspective, a lot of the buzz for this film has already kind of disappeared. November through March is a long time now in the modern day, especially when it comes to films and entertainment. Do Apple need to make a change? What's your thoughts on this?
I'm intrigued by how traditional their approach has been so far, at least based on the two films that we've seen. You know, theatrical, you wait, you do the premium release for purchase, and then you wait a little bit longer and you release on streaming. I don't know if that's a part of their distribution contract, if that's something that maybe they're required to do, or if that's something they're trying to do to kind of maximize their return on investment. I think it really depends on what the goal is with these releases, because they are Apple originals, right? And ultimately Apple originals end up on Apple TV Plus. And so if the purpose of it is to build up Apple TV Plus as a service, I commend the theatrical release, of course. We want to see movies in theaters, but getting them to Apple TV Plus sooner, I think, would help boost the service if that's really what they're trying to do. Because as you said, it's already had that initial push from the theatrical release. It got a second wind for purchase and rental, but by now this is the third time people are hearing about it. And the question is, are people hearing about it for this third time now going to go to Apple TV Plus and sign up to see Napoleon? I'm sure there are some, but would there be more if they had maybe done a shorter theatrical run, skipped the premium release, or done maybe a streaming and premium at the same time or closer together? I don't know. I think it'd be cool to see some experimentation here. I don't think that this release schedule is necessarily proven to be the best from the information that we know. So I'd love to see Apple kind of play with it and see what they do. But ultimately, I think it comes down to that tension between return on investment versus growing Apple TV Plus and where the priorities really lie there.
I wonder if a compromise might be like a rental agreement where subscribers to Apple TV Plus have that 48-hour window to check it out during its PVOD run before it becomes available naturally on Apple TV Plus all the while. Maybe that's a compromise. I'm not too sure, but I feel like something definitely needs to change.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Argyle's in theaters now, so it'll be interesting to see how that rolls out when it comes to purchase and eventually streaming, probably in the not too far future. Another Apple original that we don't have a date for, but we did get news for this week, is conspiracy thriller series Prime Target, which is said to be coming soon to Apple TV Plus. The 8-episode, 1-hour series is created and executive produced by Steve Thompson and directed by Brady Wood. Leo Woodle stars as brilliant young mathematician Edward Brooks, who is on the verge of a major breakthrough that will grant him the key to every computer in the world. When he senses that a mysterious enemy is out to destroy his work, he turns to NSA agent Taylor Sanders, played by Quintessa Swindle, and together the two start to unravel the troubling conspiracy Edward is at the heart of. That sounds like a thrilling series, Sigmund, and this isn't the first time we've heard about it, right?
No, it isn't. We actually spoke about the show's production just a couple of months ago when it was still being known as Varsity. There's been a change name between production and the announcement for the upcoming Apple TV release. So really looking forward to this. It is indeed a series and not a film, as was originally reported. And it's not the only series that's upcoming and in production. Last week we mentioned Invasion had yet to be officially renewed. As soon as we stopped recording, Apple officially renewed Invasion for a third season. There was never really any doubt on that. Where there was doubt, though, was with Foundation and its third season, which we're happy to say will resume production in the Czech Republic and Poland on March 3rd. Series co-developer and executive producer and showrunner David S. Goyer, who directed 1 episode in Season 1 and 2 in Season 2, will complete his outstanding writing and directing services and will remain involved as an executive producer, but will not be directing further Season 3 episodes, as was previously planned. The ongoing production is in the process of securing directors for the multiple remaining episodes he had been assigned. Foundation filmed for several weeks in spring 2023 before shutting down due to the actors and writers' strikes. About half of the 3rd season is already in the can, according to sources of Deadline. Of course, we're happy to see this return very quickly back to production.
For sure. Another series that we're both very excited to see go into production is Jon Hamm's upcoming drama series Your Friends and Neighbors, which will begin filming in April. Announced last December, Your Friends and Neighbors sees Hamm star in the lead role as Coop, a recently divorced hedge fund manager who, after being fired, resorts to stealing from the wealthy residents in his tiny upstate New York suburb in order to keep his family's lifestyle afloat. These petty crimes begin to reinvigorate him until he breaks into the wrong house at the wrong time. I don't know about you, Sigmund, but I've been missing Jon Hamm on Apple TV Plus since the morning show wrapped up. I'm excited to see him back on the service before too long.
Yep, there was a moment there where it was everyone but Jon Hamm. It's everyone and Jon Hamm now, and hopefully soon everyone and Jon Hamm and Rooney Mara, because last week Rooney Mara gave an update on her Audrey Hepburn biopic for Apple. Mara had been set to produce and star with Call Me By Your Name filmmaker Luca Guadagnino, who had been attached to direct, revealing to an audience Q&A at London's Film Festival last October that he was no longer working on the project. The project is not completely dead, said Mara when speaking to Deadline of the Hepburn biopic. Luca is no longer going to be directing it, but the project is still very much alive, she adds. I can't say more than that right now. Personally, really, really happy that this project is still alive, given the story, which I think is a powerful one, of Audrey Hepburn's life, which of course revolves around her family life just as much as the flashbulbs of fame and what we know her to be, especially with her performances in Roman Holiday, Breakfast at Tiffany's, My Fair Lady, Sabrina, Funny Face, and Charade. Clearly the name that you wanted as a casting director, if you could get her at the time.
And speaking of casting, a couple bits of casting news. Laz Alonso will join John Krasinski and Natalie Portman in Fountain of Youth, the upcoming Apple original film from Skydance and director Guy Ritchie about 2 siblings on a global hunt to find the mystical Fountain of Youth. And Dallas Goldtooth and Tate Bloom have joined the cast of The Last Frontier. Led by Jason Clarke, the 10-episode series follows a U.S. Marshal tasked with protecting his jurisdiction in Alaska from a group of escaped inmates.
So another busy week for Apple original series and films in production, but also this week saw another busy week when it comes to Apple's FYC campaigns, with a number of awards. But before we begin with Apple original series and films, we want to start on the commercial department, because the Art Directors Guild awarded Outstanding Commercial Production to Apple for the new MacBook Pro Scary Fast event, which was of course shot entirely on iPhone 15 Pro, so that's quite an achievement in itself. And the Directors Guild of America gave awards to Kim Gehrig for the Apple Music commercial Run This Town, alongside Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Movies for Television and Limited Series to Sarah Adina Smith for Her and Him, the episode from, of course, one of our favourite series from last year, Lessons in Chemistry. Society of Composers and Lyricists awarded Outstanding Original Score for an Independent Film to John Powell for Still, a Michael J. Fox movie, and Outstanding Original Title Sequence for a Television Production went to Carlos Rafael Rivera, again for Lessons in Chemistry. On the animation side, the 51st Annie Awards winners included a Best Special Production Award for Snoopy Presents One of a Kind Marcy from Wild Brain Studios in association with Apple. And lastly, we end this week's awards news with Makeup Artists and Hairstylists Guild Awards, giving Best Contemporary Hairstyling to The Morning Show. So very, very cool. Another packed week for Apple Awards and the Apple FYC team, who no doubt are clinking champagne glasses as we speak.
This week is also packed with Apple TV releases. Just today, we have a number of episodes coming out, including the premiere of our highlight of the week, Constellation, the premiere of docuseries Messi's World Cup, The Rise of a Legend, a new episode of The New Look, and the finale of this week's recap, Criminal Record. We'll get back to that in just a moment. But this week is also a big week for the MLS with the season kicking off. Is that right, Sigmund?
Oh, it is. It is. I'm very, very excited about this. I'm not too sure where your excitement levels are, Devon, but very, very excited. Of course, kicking off with MLS Countdown on Wednesday, followed by MLS Inter Miami versus Real Salt Lake, which is the season opener ahead of game day one of course, the West and Eastern conferences. We also see a podcast return, Offside with Taylor Twellman, which is a ride through American soccer's unpredictable landscape, produced, of course, by Apple TV. Also today, Apple Music Live, featuring Jennifer Lopez, begins tonight at 7 p.m. Pacific on Apple Music. It sees Jennifer Lopez performing in LA to celebrate the release of her new album, This Is Me, now. So I'm looking forward to that. On Friday, we have yet another episode of Masters of the Air. Again, the record-breaking show continues to tell the story of some incredibly brave men, both in the air and on the ground. And we've got all of that before Saturday and Sunday, because again, as we mentioned before, MLS is back. MLS Season Pass opening weekend includes 14 matches, including Leagues Cup champions Inter Miami versus 5-time MLS Cup winners LA Galaxy, and 4 games available for free to non-subscribers in the Apple TV app this weekend. They include LAFC versus Seattle Sounders FC at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, DC United versus New England Revolution at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, alongside Orlando City SC versus CF Montreal at the same time, and on Sunday, February 25th, FC Cincinnati versus Toronto FC at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. All in the TV app. MLS Season Pass on the Apple TV app can be subscribed to for $14.99 per month during the season, or $99 per season. And Apple TV Plus subscribers can sign up at a special price of just $12.99 per month, or $79 per season. And for those season ticket holders that love the MLS action in person, they'll get MLS Season Pass for the season included with their MLS Club ticket account. One of the benefits of MLS Season Pass and all Apple TV channels is family sharing, where you can share your subscription with up to 6 family members, which I think is really, really cool. Of course, we're going to soak in the spectacle on the pitch, but there is a bit of a spectacle happening off the pitch as well when it comes to Apple and the MLS with another collaboration.
That's right. This week, the MLS and Beats announced a collaboration where Beats will become the official consumer audio products partner of the league. MLS players are going to appear in Beats marketing, and Beats is going to make custom headphones for players on 8 clubs, including Atlanta, Inter Miami, Nashville, NYCFC, St. Louis City, and Toronto, with more to come. The pictures of kind of the mock-ups of what these are going to look like are very impressive. If I were one of the players on these teams, I would be really excited to get these custom beats. And this just seems like a collaboration that makes so much sense. It's more working together of Apple and the MLS, which we love to see. Now, Sigmund, I know you've been studying up, getting prepared for this season. Give us an idea of what we can expect and your predictions for how it's all going to go.
Well, I have no idea what we can expect, but I'll give you my predictions.
Okay.
Because honestly, there is so much talent that's been brought in this closed season from around Europe and elsewhere that it is really, really difficult to predict. But what I will say is that my MVP for this year, I predict to be Hani Mukhtar at Nashville. The Golden Shoe, of course, Lionel Messi. I think that's a dead cert, unless there is a potential injury there. MLS Cup could be Inter Miami, Columbus Crew, maybe even the Seattle Sounders. And for the Supporters Shield, I'm going with Inter Miami along with LA Galaxy for the Open Cup this year. There is, again, so much happening in MLS Season Pass. There's documentaries on each team as we enter into the season as well. And of course, for those in attendance, keep your eye out for cameras as Apple are, of course, documenting this whole season from start to finish. And that will all be shown in a multi-part docuseries come the end of what I think is going to be another exciting season. Now, I've kind of given some insight. I'm trying to get the excitement levels up for you, Devon. What I decided this year was that we were going to kind of force you to pick a team, right, for the season ahead. But I thought we'd do it in a fun way. And I thought, why don't we have you peruse the different jerseys, choose one purely on design, and then see what team you actually got? Okay. There's some really fun designs this year. I've got my personal favourite, but let's see, who's your team this year based on their jersey?
Let me take a look here. I'm pulling up the jerseys now. All right, I'm pulling up the list of jerseys now. I'm going to flip through and see what we've got available. Okay, Chicago Fire FC. I like the simple red. Columbus Crew yellow doesn't do a lot for me. Oh, LAFC, the black and gold. I'm a fan of that. That's classy. Minnesota United is doing something really interesting with this Starry Night kit. Wow, there's so many options to choose from. I think I'm going to have to go with Minnesota for the Starry Night. That's a really interesting kit. I like it. I feel like I could root for a team wearing those jerseys.
Okay, Starry Night it is. I will say the kit that really kind of stuck out for me was the Portland Timbers kit this year. It's like white and green and really cool, I thought. The thing that put me off that jersey, though, was apparently the boxes that it comes in actually comes with sawdust. And I'm not too sure if you're actually going to be able to get it out of the jersey afterwards before, wearing it for the first time. So that might have been a mistake. But yeah, some really, really cool jerseys this year. Have you been to Minnesota, Devon?
I've not, but I guess I'm going to have to visit there and see my team play.
There we go. You'll have to report back. Well, that was a little bit extra, but we do actually have some extras on top of that, Devon. We got the Masters of the Air cast reading real World War II love letters during the end of Valentine's Week last week, which was interesting. We also saw Snoopy presents Welcome Home Franklin, a short talk with Rob Armstrong for Hello Apple, which I thought was really, really cool. And then on top of all of that, we got a shot on iPhone documentary behind the scenes from Usher's Apple Music Super Bowl halftime show, which was very revealing. I actually loved the symbolism that was brought in for the costumes in particular. And we end with a little bit of music. Sargo Mini Friends. They have a number of music videos also on the Apple TV YouTube channel this week. Were there any extras this week that particularly stuck out to you?
I really enjoyed the chat with Rob Armstrong, who was a writer on the Welcome Home Franklin special. Actually, Franklin's last name comes from Rob Armstrong. His name is Franklin Armstrong. A very cool little tidbit, and then he gets to come back around and kind of help write that character's backstory. I thought that was really neat. He talks about the importance of the character and what it meant to him, and his relationship with Charles Schultz. So really cool video. So that's the extra I recommend checking out, but honestly, all of them are worth your time. So be sure to check out those links in the show notes. Lots of great extras this week. I think that brings us to our recap this week, Sigmund.
It sure does. And our recap this week is, of course, for Criminal Record, a crime drama that debuted right at the beginning of this year. That finally sees its finale this week. In the heart of London, an anonymous phone call draws two brilliant detectives, a young woman in the early stages of her career and a well-connected man determined to protect his legacy, into a fight to correct an old miscarriage of justice.
Go ahead, just tell us. I killed her.
I'm investigating an allegation. What if he's innocent?
That case was investigated fairly. We got our man.
No, you got a confession.
She's got it in for us. That's the game, collateral damage.
Are you going to stop me?
Yeah.
This hails from Paul Ruttman, stars Cush Jumbo as June Lenker and Peter Capaldi as Daniel Hegarty. I, of course, had a lot to say about this when it premiered in January. A lot has happened since those initial premiere episodes on Apple TV+. Devon, interested to know your thoughts on the style of the show, if this worked with you. It's pretty hard and heavy hitting. It definitely shows London in a grittier light than I think international audiences are used to. So what was your feeling on Criminal Record?
I agree with you. It was definitely hard hitting, almost brutal at times. Just some of the realism of what June's going through. Not necessarily the easiest watch, but one that I think was ultimately worthwhile. This is not the kind of show I'm usually into. I was actually skeptical going into it. Even after seeing the trailer, I was like, oh, I'm really not sure if this one's going to work for me. Just because it's not my particular kind of story that I usually like to follow. But I decided to give it a chance because I thought it might bring something new to the genre. And I feel like it really did. With this relationship between June and Hegarty, I really feel like it brought something different to this story, something I hadn't seen before, and something that I very much enjoyed. I want to talk about Cush Jumbo's performance as June Lenker for a bit, because of course she's the character that we spend the most time with. She's really the anchor of the story, and I think she really did a great job. June is determined, she's bold, she's committed to the truth, and especially in this particular case, when it comes to domestic violence, you can tell just how much she cares about making sure that justice is carried out and that the victims are protected and that the perpetrators are brought to justice. At the same time, she's also aware that her headstrong nature isn't always received well by others. She is very self-aware, and at times throughout the series, she even asks people, like, do you think I'm being too aggressive? Is that what you think is happening here? And she's so committed to what she's doing, but at the same time, in the back of her mind, she's constantly aware of how other people perceive her and how the way she's perceived can sometimes actually work against her in trying to get what she wants. She's trying to do some good while working within a system that she knows to be imperfect and sometimes even biased. And seeing that conversation, obviously it's a conversation that's had a lot on my side of the pond when it comes to policing and the way that cases are handled and things like that. But seeing it from the other perspective, from your side of the world, was interesting too, how some of those same issues kind of are universal and just very much human. She's working this case of Errol Mathis, who's convicted of killing his partner after a confession that he claims was not sincere. And all this is brought to June's attention when an emergency caller claims to know the true killer, sending June down a path of discovering the truth and trying to protect this caller, who again is anonymous. She doesn't know who it is, but she's trying to find them and help them while also helping this man who she believes to have been wrongfully convicted. Every turn, her efforts are blocked by Daniel Hegarty, the detective on Errol's case back in the day, who claims that his work is beyond reproach and that he did get the true killer. He's obviously very focused on that confession and the fact that Errol claimed to have perpetrated this crime and using that as his justification for just kind of putting the whole thing to bed and moving on. There's this continual back and forth throughout the series. Really, the whole series is just this kind of push and pull between Hegarty and June as he uses his influence to interfere with her, and she puts everything on the line to find this caller and prove Errol's innocence. And so it's really interesting, kind of the power struggle between the two of these people. Of course, Hegarty, he's an old school detective from a different generation. He's highly regarded among the police, so he's a very powerful and connected foe for June to take on. The fact that she would even bother to do so, I think, really shows her commitment. But just the way that these two people use their position and influence to try to make this case work the way that they think that it should. Of course, Hegarty is coming from that position of power. He's a higher rank. He's got his hands in every aspect of the organization, and so he can pull the strings and even calls June's character into question at one point through this official investigation of bullying, which is really interesting. But June continues to use the resources and the abilities that she has to try to, first of all, stay off his radar as much as she possibly can, but ultimately to conduct this investigation and find the right person. Hegarty, I think, is really interesting as a character because he's willing to bend the rules in order to catch criminals and even to help cover for some of his friends' misdeeds. He's just one of those guys, he's been in there so long, he's kind of seen everything, and he's almost become jaded to some of the methods that he's been forced to use to bring down criminals over the years, working with mobs and people that you wouldn't normally think that police associate with. But he's just become entrenched in this world to the point that he doesn't even blink an eye about going around the rules in order to get that person that he's going after or to cover up. Again, he's got this group of friends who, one of them in particular seems to like to get himself into trouble a lot, and Hegarty's always pulling him out of it. And the question becomes, is he willing to go too far? You never really get insight into Hegarty's like inner life. You get a little bit of his relationship with his daughter, which is a kind of an interesting addition to the story, and some sketchy things that are going on as far as her drug use and his enabling of her drug use, which I thought was a really interesting addition to his story. But what you don't ever get is some scene where he either reveals his evil plot or it turns out that he really is so dedicated to this conviction because he truly believes that Errol did it. You don't totally know if he truly does stand by his work or if he's just trying to cover something up throughout the entire series. And I think that's interesting that his motivations, you don't totally know. And you learn more about the sketchiness of some of the stuff that he's doing, but you never fully know until the end if he really believes that he got the right person or if he's just trying to cover something up. And so I thought that was interesting.
I think in terms of like the conspiratorial nature of this show, especially from June Lenker's perspective, I wasn't too sure whether or not she was imagining more to be happening than it was. And there is that like back and forth that really up until the very last moments, we're not quite too sure ourselves, because I think the interesting and the challenging element of this show has been the character of June Lenker, because she is the eyes through which the story is told, but she's not necessarily a particularly likable character. And that might just be because she's been beaten down so much by racial discrimination and injustice for so long. Some of those elements even kind of seep into her own personal and private life when it comes to her partner and her son, and those dynamics, which I thought was a really, really interesting element of the show. I just thought this show was incredibly well written because it did start to make you question maybe your own kind of hidden prejudice that you didn't even know you had.
I agree with you. I think we could all use reminders from time to time of the reality of those prejudices. and the way they infect every part of society, including ourselves, and we have to be aware of them. And to me, that really ties in with the very ending of the series, like the last few minutes of the show. There's this moment where you feel like through a conversation with June that Heggerty is kind of redeemed, that he recognizes that bias in himself, and he chooses to start to contend with that. And you almost think, okay, this show's going to have a happy ending, and he's going to learn from this and do better in the future. And then we get the reveal that ultimately he had manipulated Errol into making this confession, even more so than we had previously thought. June gets a recording and realizes that Heggerty had basically fabricated some evidence in an interview with Errol's adoptive son to force him into admitting to this murder. And so it's kind of an upending of this whole revelation that he has, that you think that he's going to change, and then you realize that no, he knew what he was doing all along. And really, even though he was able to put on the air of trying to do the right thing and standing by his work, and even got through without having any sort of repercussions from his higher ups, he just really skated by. But at the end of the day, he knew exactly what he was doing, and he's going to continue to do the same as he did, which actually, if they wanted to do a season 2, I think that's a great setup. I don't know that they're ever going to go in that direction. I don't know if that's the intention, but it seems like there's more to this story now, that June realizes that this guy not only is probably going to continue on doing what he's doing, but probably did it even more than just this one case. I think that's a really interesting way to end the series, that, you know, even as you push for justice, even as you push people to contend with this stuff, there are some people who just aren't willing to change, and that's a sad reality of life. And of course, we hope that everyone will, and we challenge ourselves to do that. But it's a continual process, right? And something we always have to be aware of. And that's my takeaway from the series. Regardless, Criminal Record, it's a great series, comes highly recommended from the two of us, and we suggest you check it out. The entire series is streaming now on Apple TV+.
Another packed week on Apple TV. Lots of conversation had. But we end this episode, as we do every week, with our Up Next picks from Apple TV this week. Not just the TV app, because, Devon, you have a gaming recommendation for us this week, which the name has me very intrigued.
That's right. My pick this week is Audacity. It's a new Apple TV app from developer Justin Farrell. It's a game that's available across iPhone, iPad, and Apple TV, and you can also install the iPad version on your Mac or Apple Vision Pro if you like. But it's not a competitive game. It's a social game. And I really love the story behind this app. It started off as a Valentine's Day gift that Justin made for his wife, Audra, which is where the name comes from. And basically what he wanted to do was give them a game to play on date nights to just start up some interesting conversations. And so he built this app with multiple categories of questions, hundreds of questions, and you can pick which categories you want, from romantic for couples or history, fantasy. There's all kinds of questions that you can choose from. And you just pick the categories that you want and hit play, and the app will start showing you these interesting questions to have these conversations between yourself and your partner, or if you're in a group of friends, you can all go around the room and answer these questions and just start these interesting conversations, kind of just get you thinking about something other than the day-to-day and, you know, the typical things that you talk about, and just kind of push that conversation outside your comfort zone. And so I'm excited to pull this out the next time I have friends over. And having it up, of course, on that big screen is just perfect because everyone can see it. You're not passing something around or all squinting. It's just right there on the Apple TV. So I'm really happy that Justin decided to include it on the Apple TV. I love the concept for the app. I love the story behind it. And I think it's just a lot of fun and an interesting social game to just make things a little more interesting when you're together with friends or with your partner.
I'm looking forward to checking this out. My thanks also to Justin. Great idea for the Apple TV and our communal screen.
That's right.
Now, highlights on our communal screen this week include the season premiere for The Bad Batch on Disney+, but then also a ton of films that are premiering in the TV app, starting with The Zone of Interest, which just cleaned up at the BAFTA Awards this past weekend. Memory, which is also on PVOD, and then on Thursday, All of Us Strangers, which is going to be both on Hulu and PVOD. Lots of awards nominations, actually shot in Croydon, not too far away from me, so definitely check that one out. On Friday, we have one of my highlights from the previous year, Occupied City. This is a 4-hour, 15-minute documentary from the great Steve McQueen, available on PVOD, alongside Priscilla, which will be, I think, the second film from A24 coming to Max this weekend. And finally, The Promised Land, which stars Mads Mikkelsen in an 18th century Denmark as an impoverished war hero captain setting out to tame a vast uninhabitable land on which seemingly nothing can grow. All of that heavy awards bait aside, my up next pick this week is a film called Anyone But You, starring both Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell. It tells the story of an amazing first date, which sees Bea and Ben's fiery attraction quickly turn ice cold until they find themselves unexpectedly reunited at a destination wedding in Australia. So they do what any two mature adults would do, pretend to eventually be a couple. And it has a lot of comedic mishaps along the way. There is some schmaltzy drama there as well, and it all ends quite nicely, as you would imagine from this kind of fare. But yeah, I checked this out in cinemas on my trip to California. I did maybe nod off for like 5 minutes in the middle somewhere, and apparently I missed a really good joke. So I'm looking forward to rewatching this, Anyone But You, available in the TV app. Definitely the welcome retreat from, say, all of the hard and heavy hitting films. If you're looking for another dose of that after seeing Argyle, whilst this is completely different, I think it gives you like a good 2-hour blast of just good fun entertainment.
Well, we could all use more of that, Sigmund. Hopefully our listeners will agree that we provided that to them this week. We want to end this week, as always, by thanking everyone for listening. We welcome your feedback, so be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review there. You can contact us on social media via the links in the show notes, and you can email the show or send us an iMessage to magic@macstories.net. We'll be back next week with the debut of The Completely Made Up Adventures of Dick Turpin. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and happy kickoff weekend, everyone.